Hello friends, welcome back to DigiTalk. So again, based on the request from multiple engineers, I am creating this session. Okay, and what we are going to cover here, we are going to cover the difference uh, between plain WebLogic and along with that Fusion middleware infrastructure. Okay, so now we have a two kind of a WebLogic installer. One is the plain WebLogic installer, and second is the Fusion middleware infrastructure installer. Okay, so this is WebLogic and this is also WebLogic, but the main difference is that along with the plain WebLogic features, this Fusion middleware infrastructure contain few more features. Okay, that is specifically applicable for the Fusion middleware applications. Okay, so I'm sure if you have some idea of the Fusion middleware applications, then you must heard about the SOA suite, maybe the IDM stack, which contain the OID, OUD, OIM, okay, which is now OIG from 12C onward, identity governance. Along with that, we have a Web Center portal, Web Center content. So there are multiple Fusion middleware component or stack from the Oracle, okay, which is completely based on the Fusion middleware infrastructure. Okay, so now one thing is very clear. If you need the any of the Fusion middleware component to be installed in your environment, then you need the Fusion middleware infrastructure installer of the WebLogic. You can't go with the plain WebLogic. Okay, this is not going to work. Okay, so this is one of the prerequisites. So when we install any of the Fusion middleware component, so we first install the Fusion middleware infrastructure, and once this is installed, during the installation of the particular Fusion middleware infrastructure component, we have to specify the location of the Fusion middleware infrastructure where we have installed, which is also referred as Oracle Home. Okay, so that means all the Fusion middleware component installed on top of your WebLogic, and which is not only plain WebLogic, which is called the Fusion middleware infrastructure. Now, what is the relation between all of this that I'm going to explain here? Okay, so let me quickly erase this one. Okay, so now let us do a small comparison of the plain WebLogic along with the Fusion middleware infrastructure. What are the different components that we have in the plain and in the middleware infrastructure installer? So when we talk about the plain WebLogic, okay, so it contains the core application server features. Core application server features. So now what are core application server features? So that means it support the Java Enterprise Edition, which is now Jakarta Enterprise Edition features. Okay, for example, if you have application developed in the servlets, JSPs, EJBs, you are going to use the JMS data source. So all these features are part of the core application servers. Along with that, we have option of clustering, load balancing, which is the solution for the high availability, right? And then we configure the data source. We configure the RELN, where we configure the username and then policies. We have the node manager. We have the WLST, command line interface, and then we have the diagnostic framework. These are the certain important features which is part of the core application server, which is there in the plain WebLogic. Okay, now if we do a side-by-side comparison of this plain WebLogic with the Fusion middleware infrastructure that we use with the Fusion middleware stack, okay, so all the features of the core application servers are there. Okay, now along with that, what are the extra important features what we have? We have the JRF, which is called the Java required files, and along with that we have the OPSS, which is the Oracle Platform Security Service. We have KSS, which is the key store service, and along with that we have the EM console, okay, Enterprise Manager console. Okay, and this complete stack, if we specifically if I talk about the JRF, or if I talk about the application, the middleware applications, like we discuss about the SOA, Web Center content, Web Center portal, IDM stack. Okay, so all these applications are based on the ADF, okay, which is called the application development framework. Okay, so that means whatever the applications we build, specifically if we talk about the SOA, okay, we have JDeveloper. I'm sure you heard about that one. If we have information of the some Oracle stack, JDeveloper. So this JDeveloper is a tool that we use to build multiple SOA applications, and specifically if we talk about the SOA, which is a service oriented architecture, okay, we build the SOA composite in the JDeveloper. Right. So this is the ADF, application development framework. So this JDeveloper is an application development framework ADS tool, which we use to build the middleware applications. Right. So now once the applications are built in the JDeveloper, okay, then we need the environment as well to run those applications. For example, if I say that we have developed an composite application in the JDeveloper, now we need some environment to deploy this application and to execute this application, correct? So that runtime environment for the ADF we get with the help of JRF in the Fusion middleware infrastructure, which is called the Java required files. Okay, so this is a set of libraries and multiple other dependent files, okay, which also contain the runtime environment for the ADF. You can say it a runtime environment for the ADF. And now why I am saying it runtime, because the application we have developed in the JDeveloper, right now we need an environment to run the application that we have developed in the JDeveloper. So that runtime environment is provided by the Fusion middleware infrastructure, and specifically inside the infrastructure we have a component which is called the JRF, Java required files. Okay, and that is the that contain the runtime environment for the ADF application that we have developed in the JDeveloper. Correct. So this is one of the prerequisites for the JRF. Now apart from that, we have the OPSS and KSS as well. So I have just posted a video or session on the key stores where I have explained OPSS and KSS in detail. So I will give that the description of that video in the description of this video. You can take a look on that session as well. So what is OPSS? It is called the Oracle Platform Security Service. Okay, so this is a framework for the security services. So what is it? Is a framework for security services. So that means in Fusion middleware infrastructure, whatever the application we deploy, okay, whatever the component or resources we configured, okay, for that the security features are enabled with the help of this OPSS component, which is called the Oracle Platform Security Service. So this is one of the mandatory requirement, okay, or it automatically configured when we go with the JRF domain, okay, in the Fusion middleware infrastructure. Right. So that means when we create the domain in the plain WebLogic, okay, we select the basic template of the WebLogic. But when we go for the creation of the domain in the Fusion middleware, okay, it asks for the multiple component, and one of the component is JRF, Java required files, which give the runtime environment for your ADF applications, along with that multiple more things. Now OPSS, as I said, it is an Oracle Platform Security Services, and KSS is the Key Store Services. Now this is one of the big difference in the plain WebLogic and the Fusion middleware infrastructure. So if you have some idea of the SSL in the plain WebLogic, when we configure the SSL in WebLogic, okay, we have the identity and trust store, identity and trust key stores. We have two kind of stores, identity and trust. Okay, and basically most of the time you will see we configure it in the JKS format. Okay, for example, your WebLogic use the default demo identity and demo certificate, okay, which has the .jks extension, and this is still 14.1.1 version, and then from 14.1.2 version it is PKCS12 format in WebLogic. Okay. So now when we talk about the Fusion middleware, in the Fusion middleware we have a separate key store service which is called the KSS. Okay, so that means in the Fusion middleware infrastructure we configure the security services like SSL with the help of KSS, which is another key store. So here, as I said, we have the JKS, we have the PKCS12. These are the two key store formats. So in Fusion middleware we use the KSS, right? So now one of the big dependency in the Fusion middleware infrastructure is all the middleware component what we have discussed, SOA, Web Center, Portal, Content Integration, IDM, it all stores the data, or you can say metadata, in the database. So this is one of the prerequisite when you are going to install or configure any of the middleware software. Okay, you have to database in place. Okay, so after the database in place, and when you create the domain, before that we create some schemas in the database for that particular component. For example, if you are going to install SOA, so you need to create the SOA related schemas in the database, and for that we have the repository creation utility available with the software that we install. For example, the any of the middleware stack like the SOA. Okay, so this OPSS and KSS, okay, this all security framework and all these security services data are stored in the database, not at the file system level. Everything is stored in the database. Okay, so now this is the main major differences specifically when we talk about the Fusion middleware infrastructure that we use is for the middleware applications. What are the different features it has along with the basic application server, JRF, OPSS, KSS, and along with that you have the EM console as well. Like just like we have a admin console for the WebLogic, we have a EM console, enterprise manager console, which we use to manage your domain. Along with that, to manage the middleware stack applications that we deploy on top of your Fusion middleware infrastructure. Okay. So now, as I said, we have a dependency on the database. So this is one of the prerequisites that you need a database to be in place. And then we run the repository creation utility to create the schemas. And once it is created, then we create the domain. And for domain creation, we have the same script that we have in the plain WebLogic, which is config.sh. The only difference is that when you are going to create the domain, it will prompt you for the multiple domain component to be configured specifically in the Fusion middleware infrastructure. Okay, so now let me clear it and then let me show you the architecture of the Fusion middleware, how we configure and it. Okay, so if you are going to have a installation configuration of any of the middleware component like SOA, okay, so the basic requirement is that you should have a database in place. Okay, once the database in place, you can have the Fusion middleware infrastructure installer that you need to install. Okay, so when you go to edelivery.oracle.com to download the software, so just search for the Fusion middleware infrastructure and you will see the installer for that one. Okay, so install the Fusion middleware infrastructure. For example, maybe you have installed it in OPT and then Oracle, and then we install the middleware stack. For example, you run the SOA installer, and when you are installing the SOA, it will ask you to provide the location for the Fusion middleware home, which is also called the Oracle home, and you have to select the same location where you have installed the Fusion middleware infrastructure. If it is plain WebLogic, then you will not able to install. It is going to give you the error. So you have to select the Fusion middleware infrastructure installer of WebLogic, and then you have to install the SOA. So once the SOA is installed, okay, there is a utility called RCU, repository creation utility, which is bundled with the SOA installer. Okay, you can run this utility and this will create the schemas in the database. And once this is done, then you can create the domain with the help of same config.sh in the Linux or .bat on the Windows. Okay, and then you can create the domain, and during the creation of the domain, you can select the different components. For example, the basic WebLogic domain template will be there. Then you can select the SOA template, you can select the EM template, and it is automatically going to select the JRF for you and OPSS for you, and OPSS is a schema that is created in the database when you run the RCU. Right, so this is the basic architecture of the Fusion middleware infrastructure or middleware component in the Oracle. So hope now you have a clarity on the difference between the plain WebLogic and the Fusion middleware infrastructure, and what is the use of Fusion middleware infrastructure installer, and then what are the different features that enabled with the Fusion middleware infrastructure that enable us to run and maintain the applications that we have developed with the help of application development framework. Thank you.